Before we begin tonight's journey, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy relaxing history stories. Leave a like to support the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us continue creating long, peaceful history videos for sleep. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let yourself drift gently into the quiet world of the medieval past. Tonight we step through the heavy wooden gates of a great medieval castle. From a distance, it appears magnificent. Towering stone walls, proud banners fluttering in the breeze, and strong towers standing against the sky. It looks like the perfect home of kings, queens, and noble lords. But as the massive gates slowly open, another reality begins to reveal itself. The air changes almost immediately. Instead of the fresh scent of stone and forests, a thick mixture of smoke, damp walls, animals, old food, human waste, and countless other odors greets every visitor. It is a smell so powerful that to modern visitors it would likely be unforgettable. Tonight we will quietly explore why medieval castles smelled far worse than most people could ever imagine. We will discover how kings and queens lived with these conditions, why perfume and fragrant herbs became so important, and how people accepted a world that smelled completely different from our own. So settle in, breathe slowly, and let the story carry you gently back more than 600 years into the fascinating and surprisingly unpleasant world of medieval castle. Now imagine yourself standing before the great gates of a medieval castle on a cool morning in Europe more than 600 years ago. The rising sun casts a gentle golden glow across the towering stone walls, and from a distance the castle looks every bit as magnificent as the stories promise. Perhaps you expect fragrant gardens, polished halls, and a luxurious royal lifestyle waiting just beyond the gate. But reality is very different. As the heavy wooden doors slowly swing open, you take your first few steps inside. Almost immediately, you notice that the air feels different. It is thick, heavy, and filled with an unfamiliar mixture of smells unlike anything in the modern world. At first, you cannot identify a single source. That is because the odor does not come from one place alone. It is the result of hundreds of different smells blending together over time. The damp stone walls, smoke drifting from countless fireplaces, roasting meat and burning animal fat from the kitchens, horses resting in nearby stables, crowded rooms filled with servants, soldiers, and nobles, damp clothing, old straw, and years of accumulated waste all combine into an atmosphere that many modern visitors would find almost impossible to endure. Today we take clean water, soap, indoor plumbing, and modern sanitation for granted. People living in medieval castles had none of these comforts, and that is why, despite their magnificent appearance from the outside, medieval castles often hid a reality that was far less glamorous than most people imagine. As you continue deeper into the castle, you arrive at the Great Hall, the beating heart of medieval life. Nearly everything important happened here. Meals were served, guests were welcomed, celebrations were held, disputes were settled, and important announcements echoed beneath the towering timber roof. At first glance, the hall appears impressive. Long wooden tables stretch from one end of the room to the other. Colorful banners hang from the stone walls, and a massive fireplace crackles with burning logs, casting a warm orange glow across the room. But within a few quiet moments, another detail begins to reveal itself. The fireplace, while providing warmth, also fills the hall with smoke. Much of it escapes through the roof, but not all of it. Thin gray clouds linger beneath the ceiling, slowly drifting through the room before finding their way outside. For the people who lived here, this was perfectly ordinary. Their eyes had long since grown accustomed to the smoke. Their clothes carried its scent. Their hair absorbed it. Even the wooden beams above had turned dark after years of constant fires. Then there was the smell of food. Huge joints of beef, pork, mutton, and game roasted over open flames for hours. Animal fat dripped into the fire, producing thick clouds of greasy smoke. Bread baked beside the hearth, while pots of cabbage, onions, peas, and herbs simmered throughout the day. To hungry guests, these aromas might have seemed comforting. But mixed together with smoke, damp stone, crowded bodies, and the countless hidden odors already filling the castle, The result was far less pleasant than the grand feast shown in modern films. The Great Hall was not simply a place of celebration. It was also one of the many places where the unforgettable smell of medieval castle life quietly surrounded everyone. Rain seeped into tiny cracks, and without modern ventilation, many rooms remained damp throughout the year. If you placed your hand against the wall, you would probably feel the cold moisture clinging to the stone. That dampness brought its own distinctive smell. It was the earthy scent of wet rock, aging timber, mold, and mildew, a smell that quietly settled into every corner of the castle. Curtains absorbed it, wooden furniture absorbed it. Even expensive clothing hanging in noble chambers slowly picked up the odor. Unlike today, there were no electric fans or climate-controlled rooms to keep the air fresh. The only breeze came through small, narrow windows designed more for defense than comfort. During the long winter months, many of those windows were covered to keep out the freezing wind. While that helped everyone stay warm, it also trapped smoke, moisture, and every unpleasant odor inside the castle walls. Fresh air became a rare visitor, and with each passing season, the sense of daily life soaked deeper into the ancient stones, becoming part of the castle itself. To the people who lived there, it was simply the smell of home. To a modern visitor, however, it would likely have been one of the first things they noticed, and one of the hardest things to forget. Now let us visit one of the least glamorous yet most essential parts of any medieval castle, the garderobe. This was the castle's toilet. Unlike the bathrooms we know today, a garderobe was usually nothing more than a small wooden seat built into a stone alcove. Beneath the seat was a vertical shaft that carried human waste downward, often into the castle moat, a cesspit, or an open ditch outside the walls. It may sound like a simple solution, but in reality it created problems that lingered every single day. On warm afternoons, unpleasant odors drifted back up through the shaft and into the castle itself. A strong breeze could carry those smells through nearby corridors and private chambers, reminding everyone that medieval sanitation was far from perfect. Cleaning these waste pits was difficult, unpleasant, and dangerous work. The task often fell to laborers whose jobs were among the least desirable in medieval society. Even after cleaning, the smell never disappeared completely. Flies gathered around waste whenever the weather became warm. Moisture and decay added another layer of odor to the already crowded air inside the castle. For kings and queens, privacy may have existed, fresh air did not. Even royal apartments were often built surprisingly close to these garderobes, meaning that noble status offered little protection from the smells that drifted silently through the stone walls. It is one of history's quiet ironies. The same castles we admire today for their beauty and strength also contained sanitation systems that most modern people would find almost impossible to tolerate for very long. And this was only one source among many that contributed to the unforgettable atmosphere of medieval castle life. From the garderobes, let us make our way toward another place that played a vital role in every medieval castle, the kitchens. Long before sunrise, the kitchen was already alive with activity. Servants hurried across the stone floors carrying baskets of vegetables, sacks of grain, fresh bread, and heavy cuts of meat. Fires burned almost constantly beneath enormous iron cauldrons, while cooks prepared meals for everyone inside the castle, from humble servants to noble lords. The heat was overwhelming. Unlike modern kitchens with ventilation systems, smoke and steam filled the air for hours at a time. The smell of burning oak wood mixed with roasting meat, bubbling broth, fresh herbs, onions, garlic, and melted animal fat. At first, those aromas might sound delicious, but remember that refrigeration did not exist. Fresh meat spoiled quickly, especially during the warmer months. To slow the process, cooks relied on heavy amounts of salt, smoking, and drying. Even then, food was not always perfectly fresh by modern standards. Some ingredients carried faint signs of decay long before they reached the cooking pot. Nothing was wasted if it could still be eaten. Grease collected on wooden tables. Smoke coated the ceiling with dark soot. Scraps of food fell onto the floor where dogs searched for leftovers, and rats waited patiently for the kitchen to grow quiet. The busy kitchen was full of life, but it was also full of smells. some comforting, others far less pleasant. Together with the smoke, damp stone, and the countless odors drifting through the castle, the kitchen became another important piece of the remarkable scent that surrounded everyday medieval life. For the people who worked there, it was simply another ordinary day. For us, it would have been an unforgettable experience.
As the day slowly fades into evening, let us quietly step away from the busy kitchens and walk toward the private chambers where the king, the queen, and the noble families spent their nights. Many people imagine these royal rooms as places filled with the sweet fragrance of flowers and luxury. The truth was rather different. The chambers were certainly more comfortable than those of ordinary servants, but they were far from spotless. Thick stone walls held the cold long after sunset, while heavy curtains and richly woven tapestries covered the walls to keep warmth inside. These fabrics served another purpose as well. They absorbed everything around them. Smoke from fireplaces, damp air, body odor, cooking smells drifting through the corridors, and countless other scents slowly settled into the cloth over months and years. Washing such enormous tapestries was extremely difficult, so they often remained hanging in the same place for long periods. Even the luxurious beds carried their own unmistakable smell. Mattresses were stuffed with straw, feathers, or wool. Blankets were rarely washed by modern standards, and over time they absorbed sweat, dust, moisture, and the scent of everyday life. To make the rooms more pleasant, nobles often turned to perfume and fragrant herbs. Small bundles of lavender, rosemary, sage, mint, and sweet flowers were placed around the chambers. Rose water was sprinkled on clothing and furniture. Wealthier nobles sometimes carried beautifully crafted pomanders, small metal containers filled with fragrant herbs, spices, ambergris, musk, or aromatic resins. These perfumes did not remove the unpleasant smells, they simply mixed with them. The result was a strange blend of sweetness layered over smoke, damp stone, and the ordinary odors of castle life. For medieval royalty, this was the scent of comfort. For a modern visitor, it would have been both fascinating and surprisingly overwhelming.
As night settles over the castle, the corridors grow quieter, the fires burn lower, and most of the household prepares for sleep. But the castle itself never truly falls silent. Somewhere in the distance, a guard's footsteps echo along the walls. Horses shift gently inside the stables. Dogs curl up beside the dying warmth of the kitchen hearth, while mice and rats quietly emerge from their hiding places in search of crumbs left behind after the evening meal. The smells of the day do not disappear with the darkness. Instead, they seem to grow heavier. With doors and shutters closed against the cold night air, very little fresh air can enter the castle. Smoke from fireplaces lingers beneath the wooden ceilings. Damp stone releases its earthy scent, while the odors of cooking, animals, wax candles, worn clothing, and countless sleeping bodies slowly settle into every room. The people inside hardly notice. After years of living in this environment, these smells have become completely ordinary. Children are born into them. Servants work through them. Knights return from battle to them. Even kings and queens accept them as simply another part of everyday life. It is easy for us to imagine medieval castles as places of perfect romance and endless luxury. Yet the reality was far more human. Behind every magnificent tower stood a world filled with smoke, noise, hard work, and the unmistakable scent of daily survival. Perhaps that is what makes history so fascinating. The greatest castles were not only symbols of...
Let us continue our quiet walk by stepping outside the castle walls for a moment toward the stables. Long before sunrise each morning, the stable yard was already awake. Dozens of horses shifted densely in their stalls, their warm breath rising into the cool morning air. Stable boys carried fresh water, replaced old straw, and brushed the animals before another busy day began. To medieval people, horses were priceless. They carried knights into battle, transported merchants across the countryside, delivered important messages, and pulled heavy wagons filled with supplies. A castle without horses could not function for very long, but horses also produced enormous amounts of waste. Each animal generated manure every single day, and although servants worked constantly to remove it, complete cleanliness was impossible. Fresh straw covered the floors, but beneath it, moisture, mud, and the smell of animals slowly built up over time. During rainy weather, the stable yard became especially unpleasant. Hooves churned the wet ground into deep mud. Rainwater mixed with manure, creating thick puddles that clung to boots, wagon wheels, and anything else that passed through the yard. The scent of hay filled the air, blending with leather saddles, damp wood, horse sweat, and the smoke drifting from nearby chimneys. For the people who cared for these animals, none of this seemed unusual. It was simply another part of everyday work. Visitors arriving at the castle would often experience these smells before they even reached the main gate. Long before seeing the king's banners or the towering walls, they would already know they were approaching a place filled with hundreds of people, countless animals, and the endless activity of medieval life. Today, many castles stand silent and beautifully restored. The smells have long since disappeared. Only the ancient stones remain, quietly reminding us that history was once a living, breathing world, one filled with sights, sounds, and scents that no modern museum can fully recreate. Now, let us quietly leave the stables behind and follow a narrow path toward the castle gardens. At first, the gardens seem like a welcome escape from the heavier smells found inside the castle walls. Small paths wind between carefully tended beds of herbs and flowers. Bees drift lazily from blossom to blossom while the soft sound of birds echoes through the cool morning air. These gardens were not created simply for beauty. Nearly every plant served a practical purpose. Lavender was valued for its pleasant fragrance and was often placed inside bedrooms, wardrobes, and chests containing fine clothing. Rosemary was believed to freshen the air and sharpen the mind. Mint added freshness to food and drink, while sage and thyme were prized for both cooking and traditional medicine. The castle's gardeners worked throughout the seasons, carefully tending these precious plants. Inside the royal chambers, servants scattered fragrant herbs across the floors and placed fresh flowers near windows whenever they were available. Bowls of rose water sometimes stood in reception rooms, offering guests a sweeter first impression. Yet nature could only do so much. A handful of lavender could not overpower the smoke from dozens of fireplaces. A basket of roses could not erase the scent drifting from nearby garderobes. Fresh herbs softened the atmosphere, but they could never completely transform it. Perhaps this explains why medieval nobles treasured pleasant scents so deeply. Fragrance was more than a luxury. It offered a brief moment of comfort in a world where unpleasant smells were simply part of everyday existence. As evening approached, the scent of herbs slowly mixed once again with smoke rising from the castle chimneys, reminding everyone that nature and necessity lived side by side within these great stone walls. As we leave the herb gardens behind, let us step into another forgotten corner of the castle, the laundry yard. Keeping clothing clean in the medieval world was far more difficult than it is today. There were no washing machines, no running hot water, and no shelves filled with scented soaps. Every piece of clothing had to be washed by hand, often using water carried from nearby wells or rivers. Servants spent long hours scrubbing linen garments with simple soaps made from animal fat and wood ash. The work was slow, exhausting, and never-ending. Heavy woolen cloaks, embroidered robes, and thick blankets were washed far less often. Many of these expensive fabrics were simply too large, too delicate, or too difficult to clean on a regular basis. Instead, they were brushed, aired outside when the weather allowed, or lightly scented with herbs and fragrant waters. As a result, clothing slowly absorbed the smells of daily castle life. Smoke from fireplaces settled into the fabric. The scent of candles lingered in heavy sleeves. The dampness of stone corridors clung to cloaks worn during long winter evenings. Even the garments of kings and queens carried traces of the world around them. Perfume was not always used to make people smell wonderful. More often, it was used to make unpleasant smells a little easier to live with. Perhaps that is one of the biggest differences between our world and theirs. Today, we expect clothing to smell fresh after every wash. For medieval nobles, simply having clean linen beneath a heavier outer garment was often considered a sign of comfort and good fortune. It was a different way of living, a different understanding of cleanliness, and another reminder that the beautiful castles we admire today once belonged to a world whose everyday reality was far more complicated than the legends would have us believe. As the castle slowly awakens to another day, let us make our way toward the bustling marketplace just outside the outer walls. Not every smell came from inside the castle itself. On market days, Merchants arrived from nearby villages with carts loaded with fish, cheese, salted meat, vegetables, spices, firewood, wool, and freshly baked bread. Farmers led sheep, pigs, and chickens through the crowded streets, while blacksmiths hammered glowing iron in workshops filled with smoke and sparks. The marketplace was alive with movement. Voices echoed through the air as traders bargained over prices, children ran between wooden stalls, and traveling musicians entertained anyone willing to stop and listen. It must have been an exciting place to visit. But it was also a place of powerful smells. Fresh bread shared the air with fish that had traveled for days. Bundles of fragrant herbs rested beside piles of animal hides waiting to be tanned. Smoke from blacksmiths' forges drifted across the square, mixing with the scent of horses, muddy streets, and countless cooking fires burning beneath simple iron pots. After a heavy rain, the roads turned soft and muddy. Without paved streets or modern drainage, water collected in deep ruts left by wagons and horses. Mud mixed with straw, animal waste, and discarded scraps from the busy market, creating conditions that most modern visitors would find difficult to imagine. Yet for medieval people, this was simply the smell of commerce. It was the scent of food arriving, business being done, families earning their living, and communities gathering together. To them, these familiar smells represented prosperity. To us, they remind us just how different everyday life was inside and just beyond the walls of a medieval castle. As the busy sounds of the marketplace begin to fade behind us, let us return through the castle gates one final time and climb the narrow spiral staircase leading toward the highest tower. The climb is slow. Each stone step has been worn smooth by countless generations of guards, servants, messengers, and noblemen who walked the same path hundreds of years ago. The air gradually changes. With every step upward, the smells of the crowded kitchens, busy stables, and narrow corridors begin to grow weaker. A cool breeze slips through the narrow arrow slits carved into the thick stone walls. At last, you reach the top. From here, the view stretches for miles. Rolling fields, quiet forests, distant villages, and winding rivers spread across the landscape beneath the morning sun. Birds circle high above the towers, while soft clouds drift peacefully across the sky. For a brief moment, the castle feels almost fresh. The clean country air washes over the ancient stones, carrying away many of the heavy scents that filled the rooms below. Perhaps this is why guards often appreciated their long hours upon the walls. Here, high above the crowded halls, they could enjoy something surprisingly rare within a medieval castle: fresh air. Looking down from the tower, it becomes easier to understand the remarkable balance of medieval life. Below lies a world of smoke, animals, kitchens, workshops, servants, nobles, and endless daily activity. Above lies silence, open skies, and the simple comfort of a cool breeze. The castle was both a fortress and a home, a place of beauty and hardship, a symbol of power, and a reminder that even the grandest lives were shaped by the ordinary realities of the world around them. And as the wind quietly whispers across the ancient stone, our gentle journey through the forgotten smells of medieval castles continues. As the evening sun begins to sink behind the distant hills, the castle slowly settles into its familiar nightly rhythm. Servants carry wooden buckets through the corridors. The last meals of the day are cleared away from the long tables of the great hall. Candles are lit one by one, their soft golden light dancing across rough stone walls that have witnessed centuries of ordinary lives. Somewhere below, cooks prepare tomorrow's bread. In another corner of the castle, blacksmiths finish repairing tools before allowing the glowing coals to cool for the night. The castle never truly sleeps. Even after darkness falls, there is always someone standing watch upon the walls, someone tending the horses, someone feeding the kitchen fires, or someone quietly walking the corridors with a flickering lantern. The smells remain just as busy. Warm candle wax melts slowly into iron holders. Wood smoke rises gently through the chimneys. Fresh bread cools upon wooden racks, while barrels of ale rest quietly inside dark storage rooms. Nearby, damp wool cloaks hang beside the fire after a rainy day's journey, filling the air with the familiar scent of wet fabric and burning oak. None of these smells existed alone. They blended together hour after hour, day after day, until they became the very atmosphere of castle life. Modern visitors often imagine medieval castles as silent museums filled with empty rooms. But in their own time, these walls echoed with conversation, laughter, footsteps, barking dogs, ringing bells, and the countless sounds of people simply living their lives. And every one of those lives added another small piece to the unforgettable scent of the medieval world. Perhaps that is the greatest secret hidden within these ancient stones. They do not merely tell stories of kings and battles. They quietly preserve the memory of ordinary days, lived by ordinary people in an extraordinary age. As midnight quietly settles over the castle, a deep stillness begins to spread through the ancient halls. Most of the candles have burned low. The great fireplace in the hall glows softly with fading embers, casting gentle shadows that dance across the worn stone walls. Outside, the wind whistles around the towers, carrying with it the distant hoot of an owl somewhere beyond the forest. Inside the castle, nearly everyone is asleep, or at least they are trying to be. The silence is never complete. Wooden beams creak as the old building slowly shifts with the cooling night air. A horse stamps its hoof in the stable below. Somewhere in the darkness, a door quietly groans on its iron hinges before falling still once again. These sounds were as familiar to medieval people as the ticking of a modern clock is to us. And so were the smells. The faint scent of smoke still lingered in every room, woven into tapestries, blankets, wooden furniture, and even the stone itself. Lavender and rosemary placed earlier in the evening had begun to lose their freshness, leaving only a gentle reminder of the effort to make the castle feel more pleasant. Yet beneath those herbs remained the unmistakable atmosphere of everyday medieval life. It was not the smell of neglect. It was the smell of a home that never truly stopped working. Hundreds of people lived within these walls. Meals were prepared every day, animals were cared for every day. Fires burned every day. Life continued every day, and every ordinary task left behind another small trace that became part of the castle's unique character. Perhaps if we could spend just one quiet night inside a medieval castle, we would remember far less about the kings who ruled there, and far more about the simple reality of how history truly smelled. As the first light of dawn slowly returns to the horizon, the castle begins another ordinary day. Much as it has done for generations, the night watch quietly hands over their duties to the morning guards. One by one, the heavy gates are unlocked, and the sleepy silence of the night gives way to the gentle sounds of a waking fortress. In the kitchens, the first fires are lit once again. The smell of burning oak fills the air as cooks prepare simple breakfasts of bread, porridge, cheese, and ale. Water is carried from the well while servants hurry through the corridors with baskets, buckets, and armfuls of fresh firewood. Outside, the stable doors swing open. The horses stretch their legs after a long night, while chickens wander freely across the courtyard searching for scattered grain. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith has already begun striking hot iron, each rhythmic blow echoing across the castle walls. To us, these sounds and smells might seem overwhelming, but to the people who called this castle home, they meant something entirely different. They meant another peaceful morning. Another safe sunrise behind thick stone walls. Another ordinary day of work, responsibility, and routine. History often focuses on dramatic battles, famous kings, and legendary victories, yet most medieval people experienced history in much quieter ways. They woke early, they worked hard, they shared simple meals, they endured cold winters, smoky rooms, and the familiar smells that surrounded every corner of castle life. And perhaps that is the most remarkable truth of all. The castles that survive today are monuments of stone, but the real history was never found only in the walls. It lived in the people who filled those walls with laughter, labor, hope, and the ordinary rhythm of everyday life. Day after day, season after season, year after year. As our gentle journey through the medieval castle continues, let us pause for a moment inside one of the castle's smallest yet most important rooms, the pantry and storeroom. These quiet chambers rarely appear in films or storybooks, yet without them, life inside the castle would have come to a halt within days. Wooden shelves were lined with sacks of grain, barrels of ale, wheels of hard cheese, dried beans, onions, garlic, and salted meat, carefully stored to last through the long winter months. Everything had to be preserved. There were no refrigerators, no freezers, and no electric lights. Food that spoiled too quickly could mean hunger before spring arrived. Castle servants inspected these supplies almost every day. If moisture found its way inside, grain could become moldy. If rats chewed through a sack of flour, precious food might be lost. If barrels leaked, entire stores of ale or wine could be ruined. Even with constant care, the storerooms developed their own unmistakable scent. Dry wood, dust, old grain, salt, a faint smell of cheese aging quietly in the darkness, and the earthy aroma of vegetables waiting patiently beneath cool stone ceilings. Cats were often welcomed into these rooms, not as beloved pets alone, but as skilled hunters, protecting valuable food from the ever-present rats and mice. For medieval families, these storerooms represented security. A full pantry meant the castle could survive another difficult season. An empty one could bring fear long before winter had reached its coldest days. Today, we may remember castles for their towering walls and magnificent halls, yet hidden behind simple wooden doors were humble rooms like these, quiet places that helped keep an entire fortress alive, one meal at a time. Now let us quietly open another heavy wooden door and step into the castle's chapel. Compared with the busy kitchens and crowded halls, this room feels remarkably calm. Sunlight filters softly through narrow stained glass windows, painting gentle patterns of red, blue, and gold across the cold stone floor. The air is still, broken only by the faint crackle of candles burning before the altar. For many people living within the castle, this was the most peaceful place of all. Kings and queens prayed here before important journeys. Knights knelt here before leaving for battle. Servants slipped inside during quiet moments, hoping for comfort before returning to another long day of work. The atmosphere felt different from the rest of the castle. The scent of melting beeswax candles filled the room. Gentle clouds of incense drifted slowly upward, carrying the rich aroma of frankincense and myrrh through the silent air. Fresh flowers sometimes decorated the altar during important feast days, adding another delicate fragrance to the sacred space. For a short while, the familiar smells of smoke, kitchens, horses, and crowded corridors seemed more distant. not gone, only softened. Perhaps that was one reason castle chapels felt so comforting. They offered not only spiritual peace, but also one of the few places where the air itself seemed calmer than the rest of the fortress. Even so, the chapel remained part of the castle. The scent of damp stone still lingered beneath the incense. Cold air slipped quietly through tiny windows. Wooden pews carried the smell of age and countless years of use. Nothing here was perfect, yet in a world filled with noise, labor, smoke, and endless responsibilities, this quiet little room gave people something precious, a place to pause, to breathe, and to find a few peaceful moments before returning once again to the ordinary rhythm of medieval castle life. Leaving the quiet chapel behind, let us wander into the castle workshop, where the work of maintaining a great fortress never truly came to an end. A medieval castle was much more than a royal residence. It was a small community, and like any community, it required constant repairs. Carpenters shaped heavy beams into doors, tables, and sturdy furniture. Masons carefully replaced damaged stones that had weathered through years of rain and frost. Blacksmiths stood beside glowing forges, heating iron until it shone bright orange before carefully hammering it into nails, horseshoes, locks, and tools. The workshop was filled with its own unique collection of sounds and scents. Freshly cut oak released a warm, earthy aroma. Wood shavings covered the floor beneath the carpenter's bench. The sharp smell of hot iron mixed with charcoal smoke drifting from the forge. Leather workers softened thick hides with oils before turning them into belts, saddles, boots, and protective armor. Nothing inside the workshop was wasted. Broken tools were repaired instead of thrown away. Old wood found new purpose. Worn pieces of leather were carefully stitched back together. Life inside a castle depended on skill, patience, and resourcefulness. To modern eyes, these workshops might appear simple, yet every repaired door, every sharpened tool, and every carefully fitted horseshoe helped the castle continue another ordinary day. Even here, surrounded by the smell of timber, leather, metal, and smoke, we discover another small piece of the medieval world. A world where beauty was not created by perfection, but by people quietly working with their hands, day after day, keeping the great stone fortress alive for another generation. As our quiet journey nears its end, let us take one final walk through the castle courtyard, where nearly every path tells a story that history rarely records. The morning sun has climbed higher into the sky. Servants sweep the stone pathways with simple wooden brooms, carefully gathering yesterday's straw, fallen leaves, and scattered debris into small piles. Buckets of fresh water are carried across the courtyard, while apprentices hurry between workshops with arms full of tools and supplies. Children belonging to servants laugh as they chase one another through the open space, carefully avoiding the wagons that creak slowly across the uneven ground. Nearby, an elderly groundskeeper tends a small patch of herbs growing beside the castle wall. He knows that before the day is over, many of these plants will find their way into the kitchens, the chapel, or the private chambers of the nobles. Life moves at an unhurried rhythm. There is no rush, no machinery, no engines, only the steady pace of human hands completing one task after another, just as their parents and grandparents had done before them. Even the air seems to tell its own story. The fresh scent of morning dew drifts in from the surrounding fields, mixing gently with the familiar aromas of wood smoke, warm bread, damp stone, horses, herbs, and the countless traces of everyday castle life. None of these smells existed by accident. Together, they formed the invisible heartbeat of the fortress. If we could stand here for just a few quiet minutes, listening to the distant church bells and watching the ordinary routines unfold around us, we might discover that the true history of a medieval castle was never found only in its kings or its battles. It lived in the people who baked the bread, who cared for the horses, who repaired the walls, who lit the fires before dawn, and who quietly accepted the world exactly as it was. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson these ancient castles still offer us today. Behind every magnificent stone tower was not simply a kingdom, but a home. As the sun slowly disappears beyond the distant hills, the castle grows quiet once more. The final light of day fades from the high stone towers, leaving only the warm glow of candles shining through narrow windows. One by one, the great wooden doors are closed, and the sounds of the outside world slowly drift away into the evening. Another ordinary day has come to an end. The servants finish their final chores before seeking a few hours of well-earned rest. The cooks allow the grate fires to burn low until only glowing embers remain. The stable hands make one last visit to the horses, ensuring that every animal has fresh hay and clean water before the long night begins. Along the walls, the guards quietly begin another watch beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The castle breathes in a slower rhythm now. The scent of wood smoke hangs gently in the cool night air. Fresh straw has been spread across several rooms. Bundles of lavender dry quietly from wooden beams. A faint trace of beeswax lingers from the candles that continue to burn inside the chapel. Even after everything we have discovered, perhaps the most surprising truth is this. The people who lived here rarely stopped to think about the smells surrounding them. What seemed strange to us felt completely ordinary to them. The familiar scent of smoke meant warmth. The smell of horses meant transportation and security. Fresh herbs meant comfort. Burning candles meant light in the darkness. And the ancient stone walls, carrying the memories of countless generations, simply smelled like home. As we quietly leave the castle behind and return to the present day, it becomes clear that history is not only something we can read, it is something we can imagine, something we can almost hear, and in places like this, something we can almost smell. Thank you for joining this peaceful journey through the forgotten world of medieval castles. May your evening be calm, your dreams be gentle, and your sleep be deep. Good night.